Jibreel with the Prophet ﷺ. The angel that was closest to the Prophet ﷺ, the one who supported the Prophet ﷺ, his protective friend from the angels is Jibreel alayhi salam. And the Prophet ﷺ, he also says in another narration, he says, مَا بِن نَبِيٍّ إِلَّا لَهُ وَزِيرَانِ مِنْ أَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ وَوَزِيرَانِ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ. There is no prophet except that Allah gives him two ministers from the inhabitants of the earth and two ministers from the inhabitants of the heavens. He says, وَزِيرَايَ مِنْ أَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ. My two inhabitants from the heavens are Jibreel and Mikal. My two ministers from the inhabitants of the heavens are Jibreel and Mikal. وَوَزِيرَايَ. And my two ministers, مِنْ أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ, from the inhabitants of the earth are Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Now, how does the first encounter of the Prophet ﷺ and Jibreel go? As a young child. Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu narrates that the Prophet ﷺ was running around playing with all of the children just like everyone else, when suddenly a man came and he grabbed Rasulullah ﷺ and he threw him into the ground. So all of the other children went running to their parents and they said, Inna Muhammadan qad qutil, that Muhammad ﷺ has been killed. And as they're running to their parents, the Prophet ﷺ is watching now what this man is about to do to him. Rasulullah ﷺ said, he cut my chest. He opened my chest. He grabbed the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. And he took something from the heart of the Prophet ﷺ and he said, هَذَا حَظُّ الشَّيْطَانِ مِنْكَ. This is the portion of evil within you, the portion of the devil within you. And he threw it. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, he proceeded to wash my heart in a golden vessel of Zamzam. And the Prophet ﷺ is watching all of this as a child, and his heart was put back, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the time the kids got back, they found the Prophet ﷺ with his chest sewn up, and they said his face was blue. The Prophet ﷺ's heart was taken out physically, and he was purified, alayhi salatu wasalam. He got absolutely no explanation from that moment. He was traumatized by the incident. He didn't know what happened. 34 years later, at the age of 40 years old, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started to see al-ru'ya al-salihah or al-ru'ya al-sadiqah, truthful, righteous dreams. And that continued for 6 months. Everything that he was seeing in his dream would come true the next night. So he already has an idea that something is happening. Just to sort of understand why the Prophet ﷺ would all of a sudden start going to a cave, right? And meditating and praying. It's also been concluded now in his household between him and Khadija radiallahu anha that it's a supernatural experience, that someone is communicating with them from the divine. Some form of creation is communicating with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this continues for 6 months. Then suddenly Aisha radiallahu anha says, Allah bestowed the love of seclusion on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Suddenly he loved to be alone. Rasulullah ﷺ would climb up to Hira. Now Hira is about a 2-hour climb. But if you get up to Hira, you have this aerial view of Mecca. SubhanAllah, you see everything. The Prophet ﷺ would go up there for days, weeks, and then finally the entire month of Ramadan, وَيَتَحَنَّث. One narration says يَتَحَنَّث, which is ad-Din al-Hanifi, the monotheistic religion of Ibrahim ﷺ. He worshipped Allah in accordance with the monotheistic religion of Ibrahim ﷺ. Which means he just went up there and he prayed in any way that he could. He didn't have an organized salah. He called upon God in an Abrahamic way. That's literally what the narration is saying. Suddenly, as the Prophet ﷺ is there one day, he sees Jibreel alayhi salam. Now, did Jibreel come to him in the form of an angel or in the form of a human being? In the form of a human being. So you might be thinking to yourself, why in the world was the Prophet ﷺ scared then? Well, think about it. You're 2 hours up there, no one's around you, and then all of a sudden you see a strange man standing at the mouth of the cave, and he's just staring you down. He's not saying anything. What might you think is happening if you're the Prophet ﷺ? To add on to that, a future narration gives us an idea of what happened to the Prophet ﷺ. Rasulullah ﷺ, when he told Khadija what happens, he said, جَاءَنِي الَّذِي أَتَانِي فِي الْمَنَامِ. The one who I was seeing in my dreams came to me. So that further establishes that the Prophet ﷺ had already seen Jibreel in his dreams. And so he's thinking that this is strange. I'm not sleeping right now. I'm not dreaming, which explains why Jibreel grabbed him. He hugged him. This is real. Iqra, read. Right? Read. You are not hallucinating. This is not a vision. I'm really here. Not only am I really here and I'm squeezing you to show you that, إِنَّا سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. The words that are going to be revealed to you, this revelation that's going to come to you, it's going to be heavy, right? You need to be ready to acquire this. اقرأ. So he commanded him, read, and he let him go. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I don't know how to read. So Jibreel ﷺ grabbed him again, harder, and said, read, اقرأ. And he said, I don't know how to read. And Jibreel ﷺ grabbed me the third time. He said, he grabbed me the third time, and he held me so tight that I thought I was going to die. And said, اقرأ, read. So the Prophet ﷺ said, what shall I read? And that's when Jibreel ﷺ said, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of your Lord who creates. خلق الإنسان من علق. Who created man from a suspended clot. اقرأ وربك الأكرم. Read, and your Lord is most generous. The one who taught man that which he knew not, taught man the use of the pen. The Prophet ﷺ, as he receives these words, and that happens, Jibreel didn't grab him again. And Jibreel didn't go anywhere. The Prophet ﷺ left the cave and he went running down. And Khadija radiallahu anha said, what happened? Now, when the Prophet ﷺ told her what happened, Khadija radiallahu anha, she could have easily been like, well, maybe you should stop going up to that cave. Maybe you should stay home more often. Let's just pretend this never happened. You know, you can meditate in the corner of the house and we'll leave you alone. And inshallah, nothing will happen again. She didn't say that. Look at how beautiful Khadija, subhanAllah, she truly believed in the Prophet ﷺ before he believed in himself. Truly. She tells the Prophet ﷺ, Wallahi la yukhzik Allahu abada. Allah would never disgrace you. And she starts to give us the last 15 years of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. إِنَّكَ لَتَصِلُ rahim. You're a man who establishes the ties of kinship. You're a man who takes care of the orphans and the poor. You're a man who's generous to his guests and to his neighbors. There is no one who has a cause except that you take up their cause. Allah would never disgrace you. Khadija said,